Good evening, and welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. This evening's show is part of our Legislative Issues series hosted by Jim Parisi. I'm Bob Delaney, Executive Director of the Institute for Labor Studies and Research. Labor Vision, a production of the Institute, focuses on topics of importance to working Rhode Islanders. We hope you enjoy this evening's edition.
Thank you for joining us for this segment of Labor Vision, where we bring the General Assembly into your living room. My name is James Parisi. I'm a field representative with Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, and I'm your host this evening. Today we're going to be talking about a really important, interesting, and high-profile issue of marriage equality. And we're pleased to have two guests with us today. Representative Art Handy represents the 18th District in Cranston. Art is a member of the House HEW Committee as well as chair of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. Representative, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Jim.
Okay. Also joining us is Jim Riley. Jim is the Secretary-Treasurer of the United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 328. He was elected into that position in 2002, the same year that Art Handy joined the General Assembly. Jim, thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here, Jim.
So before we talk about marriage equality, let's start with a little bit of background. Representative, so how did you get involved in politics in the first place?
Sure. Well, I've been very involved in the nonprofit sector and done a lot of work actually on elections through those and also on my own over the years, even to the point of even helping to train some people with door knocking and things, because I'd worked at places like Clean Water Action doing door-to-door things, so I knew a little bit about that side of it, as you might imagine. But and somewhere in there, I thought about the possibility of running. But when we saw the redistricting back in 2002, you remember it was much more chaotic than this last time around, which already had its own little chaos. I mean, we went from 100 seats to 75 in the House, and the same kind of thing was happening in the Senate. And I saw the opportunity in that chaos. I wasn't very happy with my rep at the time, and decided to go for it. Started back in December before the election time around, when started talking to people, friends of mine in the labor movement, friends of mine in various other interest groups to make sure they were, that I could have their support along the way, and started talking to friends about possibly raising money, and talked to my wife and family obviously about that as well. And then just started working hard, and it was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of work, but it's paid off, I think, over also these other elections over time, because I went through the district about, I think, 1 1/3 times, door knocked one in the district all the way through one time, and then went back through it again a third of the time.
And that was your first attempt at elected office?
Yeah, other than, again, helping other people, but yes, yeah. No, I worked on Murphy York's campaign in '94. I've worked on lots of local races. A lot of the members even that are there, well, the senior members, maybe they're there now, I helped a lot of them also as well, on the progressive side of the spectrum.
All right. So other than marriage equality, what are the important legislative issues that you're working on this session?
Well, environmental issues are probably the ones that people think of me most often on. I know this year I've gotten some emails from people saying, oh, you're just an advocate on this issue. And it's funny to me, because this is important to me, very important. The civil rights in general are important to me, but this is not sort of always my frontline issue. Environmental issues often are, and then also anti-poverty issues are really important to me. And I see a lot of intersection between lots of these different issues. We've got energy efficiency and low-income heating, and what can we do to make those two things work together? So our low-income folks that are struggling with paying their heating bills, what can we do to keep those bills down in the first place? Those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jim, I know you started as a meat cutter at Stop and Shop back in the day, in the 70s. Tell our viewers who the Ufcw represents here in Rhode Island.
We're the United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 328. Our headquarters is in Providence. We represent about 11,000 members, both in Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts, Cape Cod, and the islands. We're primarily in the retail food industry, but we also have members in the banking industry, food service industry. We represent a lot of bus drivers and manufacturing, and just a touch of healthcare.
Sure. So I know you had a recent big contract going on with Stop and Shop. How did that go?
Well, every 3 years we negotiate a contract with the Stop and Shop companies covering 46,000 individuals. We have a common expiration date between all the 5 locals in New England: Local 371 in Connecticut, Local 919 in Connecticut, Local 1459 in Western Massachusetts, Local 1445 in Boston, and us. We had particularly, this in a sense, was almost like, even though we've been representing the workers there for 60 years or so, this was almost like negotiating a brand new contract because of the Affordable Care Act and what that brought into the picture. I'm not going to get into all the particulars there, but it made negotiations very interesting. We had a tough time. We got through it. There are still some unknowns that we're going to be dealing with the membership, but we were able to get the agreement ratified with wage increases and health care savings accounts, and everyone continues to have health care, and we're moving forward.
Well, good for you, and congratulations on getting it ratified. Representative, so what is marriage equality?
Well, you know, it's funny. I've been talking about this for a little while now. I know we were talking about how long I've been doing it. It's my 11th year doing it, but early on, I kept on reminding people it's really about the paper side of marriage, it's about the civil side of marriage for same-gender couples, saying that essentially we just think they should be treated the same as my wife and I. You know, we got married in '97, and I don't see any reason why, and you know, why other folks shouldn't have access to the same thing if they're committed and they want to have those rights and responsibilities. That's really what it was about, and it's about that state side of the equation. But the evolution I've had, because I've seen many members have evolutions on it, but for me, it's sort of within that issue. I've seen a lot of it's from the relationships I've built with people that have come to advocate on this issue, and I've just realized how emotionally important this is for them, and how, you know, and so for me, that's what it's really also grown into, is that ability for people to make that kind of a commitment, that for them, the only real, you know, relationship that they see in that role is marriage. And so that's what really, to me, it's about saying that people have equal access to that institution.
Right. And it's an issue of recognition for people who are looking for some recognition, I imagine.
It's definitely about that as well. But, and there are, I mean, when I talk about the civil side, there are a whole lot of again, rights and responsibilities around parentage. You know, my wife and I was automatically my son's parent, obviously for biological purposes, but also there are other, you know, I mean, when you adopt, there's a whole lot of, a host of other things, tax implications as we're seeing in the Supreme Court right now for federal taxes, but Rhode Island taxes as well, pensions, health care, all these kinds of again, rights and responsibilities that are really important to the quality of a home life for kids as well as spouses. And so it's recognition, but it's also there's a lot of important legal protections too.
Sure. So I imagine the number of legal protections are vast, but the bill's actually pretty simply worded. So could you tell our viewers what the bill really does?
Sure. It's really essentially 2 things. One, it essentially just says that 2 people of the same gender can get married. It still continues to make it clear there's certain folks who don't allow to get married under state law to avoid incest and other things like that. And then also it makes it clear, again, it's really just repeating what's in the Constitution in my mind, but it makes it clear a pastor, a priest, a minister, a rabbi, et cetera, is not required to marry anybody that doesn't meet his or her faith implications. The same thing would be true of a religious institution. It would not be required to perform that ceremony. Because again, I think those religious, there's still clear religious rights there. The Catholic Church doesn't want to do it. There's definitely other churches that don't want to do it. But then there's also some Jewish synagogues that want to. There's the Episcopal churches that want to. All we're saying is, you know, there's clarity that, you know, if you want to, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to within those churches.
So the bill does include some religious protections then?
Yeah, a lot of it is, again, I believe that the Constitution already protected people in that, but yes, it states that there very clearly.
Okay. Jim, why is marriage equality important to the labor movement?
Because we see it not only as a human right and as well as a civil right, but we also see it as a worker's right. And I think if you look back, whenever in the history of the United States, whenever there was struggle against ignorance and discrimination, the labor movement has always been in the forefront. Didn't matter what the struggle was, who the struggle was for, black white, gay, straight, anti-war, pro-war, whatever it was, there were always people from the labor unions there in the forefront. I look back in great pride when I think of marches in Selma back all those years ago, and really in the heat of the early 60s of the Civil Rights Movement, when you had Dr. King and Reverend Abernathy and Jackson and all the leaders of the civil rights community, along with members of the religious community in the United States. And there, right in the midst of them, walking strong, is Walter Reuther, the head of the mighty head of the United Auto Workers back then, telling white middle-class America, in essence, that this is okay, this is right, this is what we should be doing. Somebody who primarily his responsibility was dealing with the hours, wages, and working conditions of the people that he represented, but saw that this was important to him too, because worker rights are human rights, are civil rights. And I remember with great pride the president of my own home local union in Local 371 in Connecticut back in the early 70s when he was involved in the anti-war movement. Here was a fellow also involved in running a large local union in Connecticut, but also knew how important it was to speak out against that war.
So I know a number of different unions are also involved in it. It's not just the AFL-CIO. Have you seen a lot of grassroots union support for this issue?
Besides the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, we've gotten great support, Rhode Islanders for United for Marriage, and the NEA, the National Educational Association, the American Federation of Teachers, the United Auto Workers, the Painters Union, Scott Duhamel especially has been terrific from day one, the Iron Workers Union, SEIU 1199, and all under the sort of umbrella of the great leadership that we have on a state level in the AFL-CIO with George Nee and Maureen Martin, and lots of other volunteers and folks that show up and help out.
So have you ever been questioned by union members about why get involved in this issue? It's a contentious issue. It has some religious overtones to it.
I see our local union, Local 328, as one big family. I've always felt that way. Ever since I've been here, even when I was here back in the 80s when I was organizing on the international staff. We're a family. And I know my membership. I spend time with them. I spend time with them in the stores and at the meetings and things. And we're kind of one. And I would say to our members, how many members of our 11,000 members of our local union are members of the LGBT community? How many family members of our members, loved ones of our members, are members of that community? How many friends of our members are members of that community? I can remember years and years ago from a sort of a historical aspect here when homosexuality was kind of like this shadowy thing, and they were in the corners and they were in the dark corners and in the closet, and they were afraid because they were discriminated against. Now, ever since Stonewall riots in New York City back in the 60s, and with gay pride and ACT UP, and people finally coming out of the shadows and coming out of the closets and say that we're gay and we're proud. And I think people realize now, and they accept the biological, natural reality of homosexuality. And many people feel that, well, if it's just two people loving each other. I love my wife loves me, we get married. It doesn't necessarily have to be just in that situation. Gay people are no different than us. They love the same way that we do. And I think our membership understands that, and they're moving in that direction in a very large way.
Sure. Representative, who's handling this bill on the Senate side?
It's Senator Donna Netzelbush is the sponsor on that side. Mm-hmm. This is her second term. She's openly gay, and I think was proud to take it up. Previously, it was Senator Rhoda Perry who didn't run this last time around, mm-hmm. and so I think And Senator Perry was a great champion, had much longer time in the building than me, and had long been a champion of gay and lesbian civil rights, as well as civil rights for everyone.
Certainly. So the bill passed the House in fairly convincing fashion. What do you make of that?
Well, I think to a certain degree, it's some of the things that Jim was saying. I think people have realized things aren't. People have realized this isn't something that. Well, maybe just on the political side, I think people realize they've realized that in fact times have changed. Their constituents do want this. This is something that their constituents are, even those maybe, if you looked at the opinion polls, you sort of looked at it carefully, you'd realize in fact even a lot of the people that are maybe opposed, they just sort of on a gut level are kind of like uncomfortable with it, but in the end, they're not going to change their vote on this issue either. And I was really pleased at the ratio. I mean, I'd love to be unanimous. I realize that because I've worked on it for so long, but I think a lot of people do realize the time has come for this. In fact, some people have said, we obviously should have done it before now, but with Governor Kacharian, it made it very difficult in that sense for us to move things forward even a little bit. But I'm actually optimistic that when the push comes to shove in the Senate, we may not see exactly the same ratio, but I think we're going to see a lot more. It's not going to be split down the middle like some of the folks are doing. I think in the end, when the time comes to push a red light or a green light, green meaning yes, it's going to be really hard to say no to that. I mean, we're again, it's like what Jim said, two people that love each other. Why would anybody want to stand in the way of that? Unless you're just in a fundamental space where you just can't. And there aren't that many people like that in the building, and there definitely aren't that many people like that around the state for my door knocking. I've not met very many people doing that,
right,
that say that.
I know one of the comments that I've heard repeated is that there's a generational issue as well, that the younger people in Rhode Island really can't believe we haven't done this already. And do you think that's part of the strong vote that you got in the House of Representatives?
That definitely plays a role in it. I know I've seen the polling on some of the national stuff where the Republican Party still isn't there. They're still like it's only like 46 or 47% maybe. But if you look at younger Republicans, it's more than the national number is like 70% or some big number when you talked about like the 40 and unders or the 35s and unders. And I think that's absolutely true. As people are aging into the voting system, they're increasing that comfort. But I think there's something else that we saw Senator Portman, U.S. Senator Portman come out in favor of the first Republican senator to come out in favor, and he talked about his son being gay, and some people were criticizing that being the rationale. But like Jim said, I think that the civil rights movement of the 60s took longer to a certain degree because I don't think as many people I'm from Richmond, Virginia, so I'm from I went to public schools in Richmond, Virginia. Most of my friends growing up were African American actually through that public school system. So I mean, for me it's confusing sometimes when I talk to some people in different places, but I do understand that exposure, that you get to have friends in that sense, changes your opinion over time about civil rights, and I think that's true on the gay rights side of it. But it's because of the biological component there. People have gay family members without being able to sort of segregate themselves from it, for lack of a better way to put it. And I think that's part of what's changed things too. But because you have seen it, some of the conservative folks I've talked to, the reason they're supporters is because they have a daughter, they have a son. Occasionally they have a sibling. And I think that's helped make this happen faster. We watched how fast this has happened compared to how long it took women to get the right to vote, how long it took for African Americans really to get the true voting rights that they deserved.
We talk about polls, and I took a poll that I think is very important, and it talks about what you said. My stepdaughter, a few years ago, it was about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, had about 10 or 11 of her girlfriends from school over St. Luke's and Barrington over the house for a little overnight, what do they call them?
Slumber party.
Slumber party, yeah, whatever. Anyway, I was down there talking to them, and I asked them. I said, "Listen, what do you girls feel? How do you girls feel about boys marrying boys and girls marrying girls, marriage equality?" And each one of them said, "What's the big deal? What's the big deal?
How does it affect me?"
How does it affect me? And I think that also has to do with the fact that gays are out. Everybody knows about it. It's not something in the shadows anymore. And all the young people are growing up without the discrimination, without the harassment, without the arrest. They're growing up knowing that they're no different, they're exactly the same as us. I think that's an excellent poll to take.
Yeah, well, that's funny. You look at it, you wonder, I mean, you know, I think not enough people know labor members sometimes, and I think to a certain degree that you see some of the distance people have and the labor movement sometimes from it is because they just they actually don't know folks in that sector. I think the same thing's true for a lot of things, and and I
personal stories always move people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I know the labor movement has raised its profile on this issue significantly in the last couple of years. Has that mattered in the politics?
I think it has. I mean, you know, it's one of those things. Maybe part of it's giving cover to some folks that are maybe a little more want to have a gruffer kind of perspective that maybe still were okay with it. But for me, also, I think it shows the momentum along the way. Now, again, the AFL came out early on in Rhode Island for it. I don't know enough about the national side of it, and I credit George Nee really pushing that at the state level. But also, I think they've realized, you know, to a certain degree they need to lead, but also they obviously, you know, you want to, a lot of the member unions, I think, also, you talked about Scott Duhamel. I mean, he was one of the earliest union members that came and testified on it, and, you know, he really did. I think he also added that level, but it has made a huge difference, in my opinion, in a momentum, but also there's a lot of organizing that you guys obviously bring to the table too, at helping us get the folks out in people's districts to get fired up about this stuff.
Sure. Jim, I know you've been involved in the organizations in support of this legislative issue, and I also know that you've testified on the bill personally in the past. So how do you see labor's role in shaping this political debate and moving this issue forward?
Marriage confers automatic responsibilities and protections that are essential for sustaining families. And wages are not the only issue with us. There are other issues too, and marriages decisively affect the worker's ability to protect their family. We know that. That's why I talked about it being a worker's issue. And I'll just give you an idea of whether federal or state level. There are over 1,400 rights and protections guaranteed under the law for people that are married. Civil marriage provides families with 1,400 rights. Access to workers' compensation, protections for the family of a worker on the job. Access to Social Security protection upon the death, disability, or retirement of a spouse. Access to Employer Retirement Income Security Act, to leave a pension to your spouse. Access to Family and Medical Leave Act protection to care for a new child or a sick or injured family member. Access to COBRA, so spouses don't immediately lose health care insurance once one is laid off, and access to hundreds of other critically important benefits and protections. For instance, under workman's compensation, a same-sex partner is not recognized as a worker's dependent for purposes of the workers' compensation system, which is intended to assist an employee and an employee's family if they were wholly or partially dependent on the employee at the time of the employee's job-related injury. Under Social Security law, if a covered worker is retired, disabled, or dies, his or her same-sex partner cannot claim benefits for the benefit of himself or herself and any children based on the worker's work credits. They go on and on and on.
And those are all programs that the labor movement fought long and hard for. And there was a segment of the population, both union members and non-members, who couldn't access it to their full ability.
It just seems that until gays and lesbians have the right to get married, there's always going to be a schism between them and the married heterosexual colleagues in the same office, in the same room, at the same work site as them. And we need to change that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so true. So I know there's a real grassroots effort involved in supporting this issue that the labor movement's involved in. Jim, what have you seen and what activities are going on in terms of fundraising?
I credit Ray Sullivan and also Ocean State Action and JWJ and all of the many myriad of volunteers, both from labor organizations, non-labor organizations, just people from the community, working with Rhode Islanders for United for Marriage. And they've been having phone banks and walks and fundraisers and lots of different activities on a regular basis. And as far as labor is concerned, besides the fact that we help out in the phone banks and all that too, we had our fundraiser, our big labor fundraiser for marriage equality last week at the Ufcw Hall. And it was very, very well attended. It was catered by Senator Josh Miller's fabulous food service people from over at his 2 restaurants in the city. And he did a terrific job there too. And we raised $48,700 for the cause so we could keep up that activity. And we're proud of that night, and proud of what we have brought to the table, what we brought to the table that night, and what we'll continue to bring to the table until we have the party and celebrate, because we finally joined the rest of New England and brought marriage equality to Rhode Island.
That's the other thing that's frustrating, is that notion that people say that it's going to change things. But Massachusetts has now had it for a long while. Even New Hampshire, that folks see as this sort of conservative bastion. But those folks are, again, I think, very New England, and they're sort of, it's not my business. What you do in your room, why am I worried about what you're doing along the way? And the other thing I want to make sure, the faith community is also, I think, a large segment of the faith community, very strong in this, really helping to show what this is really about.
Mm-hmm. I know I was impressed when my organization, the AFT, came out in a very public way in support of it a couple of years ago, how little negative reaction we got from our 10,000 members. And what are the experiences that you've seen in your district about the negative, the folks who are really unhappy with this? Do you get a lot of that?
No, and I have 2 good-sized parishes, Catholic parishes in my district, so I assumed I was going to get this. In fact, I warned my wife when I put the bill in 2003. The first time I said, I think we're probably going to get some nasty answering machine messages, things like that. But it really hasn't worked out that way. And I think folks would be right in saying my district is a reasonably liberal district. But again, 2 good-sized Catholic churches in there. Plenty of blue-collar, kind of older folks that are not, this isn't naturally sort of in their place. But I'll tell you, I certainly in the last few years, I've gotten a lot more media attention around my position. So when I go door knocking, a lot of times people do know where I stand on it. I've got at least I've talked about LGBT civil rights on my palm card when I go door to door. I've gotten only a handful of negative reactions. I had one guy, actually a younger guy, that said, where are you on gay marriage? I said, for it. He said, well, I can't vote for you. That is one of the only ones I can remember. The last election cycle, he's the only guy I can remember. There may have been a couple other folks that were gruff or something. I knew that they maybe had some other thing going on. But if somebody asked me about marriage equality or about gay marriage or where do I stand on it, probably 19 times out of 20, they're in favor of it. That's I'm getting the question when people want to make sure I'm for it, not the other way around. And I had not heard other people tell me that different. Again, there's some folks that claim that there's this big share of their district. I asked them if they door knocked. They did not. So I think that they think they know their district, but I challenge them to go out and actually talk to their constituents. I think they'll find something very different to be true.
Sure. Jim, same question for you. Within your organization, are you getting a lot of pushback from your members about your prominent role on this issue?
None. None from any of the members, nothing from any of the staff, nothing from anything of the executive board. If anything, they're proud of the work that I'm doing, and they're proud that like I talked about other labor leaders, that not only are we involved in hours, wages, and working conditions for our employees, but we're also involved in lots of other ancillary activities that are good for the entire community.
And I think that one of the things that I think that it makes me proud to sort of be a friend of labor in that sense, because I know that one of the things I work to do is try to pull people together, see the environmental movement, be able to work with the labor movement, because I think there's a huge amount of overlap and opportunity there. Anti-poverty side of things, again, George Nee has always been there for things I've worked on anti-poverty issues and things like that. But I do know that there's this tremendous overlap. I mean, there's a self-interest in that sense. But there's opportunity at the same time too to build those bridges that makes us stronger as a progressive, pro-people kind of movement.
Well, the labor movement has always been about more than just wages, hours, and working conditions, but sometimes even our own members don't know that history, and it's good for us to remind them, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, I thank you both very much for your time. This was a great discussion about a very important issue, and maybe we'll have you on again when the show is done and we can talk about results.
Let's get you the party first.
Yeah, get the party. We'll get the next show will be at the party or something like that.
Thank you much.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much.
Nice to see you.
And thank you for joining us for this segment of Labor Vision. Thank you.
While some of the most conservative congressmen in Washington are working to end Saturday delivery of the mail, letter carriers across the country and here at Garden City are calling attention to why six-day service is so important to our economy. Congressman, tell us why Saturday delivery is so important for Rhode Island.
Well, I'm here with all these great letter carriers to raise awareness about why it's important to preserve the Saturday delivery. Six-day delivery is what we've always known the Postal Service to stand for, and getting the mail delivered there in a timely manner, reliably. And to have Saturday delivery go away, I think would have unintended consequences that we can't anticipate fully right now. I think it would impact seniors, I think it would impact businesses, I think it would impact communities, and I don't want to see that happen. I think there are alternatives that we can look at before we even think about having to eliminate Saturday delivery. I think this is a action of last resort, eliminating Saturday delivery, but it seems to be that in some members of Congress think it's an option of first resort. It's the thing that we should look at first, and I disagree. I think that's a backwards approach.
About 200 members of the National Letter Carriers Association gave up a gorgeous Sunday afternoon today to educate Rhode Islanders about how crucial Saturday delivery is for the small businesses here in the Ocean State. It's also critical to the thousands of people that work for the post office here in Rhode Island. Do you know, Ingrid, how many people does the post office employ here in Rhode Island?
Letter carriers, they employ about 50,000.
50,000. Yeah. How many jobs do you think would be in jeopardy if we ended Saturday service?
Probably about a quarter of the workforce.
Okay,
so we're talking quite
more than 10,000 jobs.
We're talking quite a big number of jobs, yes. Okay. Because you're also talking, besides the letter carriers who actually do the delivery, you're also talking there'd be a decrease in the mail handlers and the clerks who work at the plant and get the mail ready for those days, as well as the rural letter carriers who function in not the city, but in the rural part of the state. So those people would also be affected and lose their jobs. So that's how many jobs you're talking, quite a few, just in the state.
Postmaster General Patrick Donahue is trying to end Saturday service as a way to cut costs.
Our Postmaster General has decided that, let's just get rid of service, get rid of this and that, and we're just going to go away. And that's why, basically, we're saying now is that we need a new Postmaster General. He has to go. We got to get rid of him.
But Congress and the Congressional Budget Office told management last week that it doesn't have the authority to do so. Still, conservative Republicans Darrell Issa of California and Tom Coburn of Oklahoma are looking for an end around to that decision so they can slowly starve to death Saturday service. Fortunately, there's a way to save money, jobs, and mail delivery in the United States, which is constitutionally mandated, by the way. Many people assume that it's email that's doing in the post office, but that's not the case. While first-class mail is dropped off a little, we all know we still get plenty of stuff in our mailboxes every day.
It's important all around the country. A lot of people, whether it's in their personal lives or their businesses, depend on Saturday deliveries.
The post office has traditionally been self-sufficient, supporting itself by selling stamps and offering other services. In fact, only a decade ago, it was overpaying its retirement obligations by more than $70 million. So the Republican-led Congress and George W. Bush have figured out a new way to starve this efficient and egalitarian public service. They passed a law in 2007 forcing the post office to put aside more than $5 billion a year to pre-fund its retirement obligations, a requirement that no other government agency has to adhere to, and despite the fact that its pension fund was already very healthily overfunded. While the post office faces increasing competition from the internet and private delivery corporations, politicians in Washington are putting artificial economic barriers in the way of its success. This means service suffers for the many small businesses and others who rely on mail in Rhode Island. And for some of the letter carriers here today at Garden City, it could also mean their jobs. This is Bob Plain for Labor Vision and RIFuture.org. Representative Ferry, why is payday lending reform important?
Well, because families are getting caught in a financial disaster with payday loans because of the high interest rate that they charge. I have an employee who got caught into that. Like I said, he made a loan about $350 in November a few years ago and didn't get out of it until the following July because actually I found out about it and helped him with it.
Right. So why has it taken 3 years to get this through the General Assembly? What's the holdup?
Well, I think part of the reason that we've gotten this far right now and have the momentum is because we've grown the coalition. We've done the education we need to do. Because most people believe that, what's the matter with this loan? Somebody has an emergency, they go get a loan, in 2 weeks, they get paid, they pay it off. What's so bad about that? So they have to pay $35 fee. Well, it sounds reasonable, but that's not the business model of payday lenders. The business model is to have these people repeat the loans. And most people who are in that circumstance end up finding out that they can't pay the loan off in 2 weeks. So what they do is they pay the fee and then they make a new loan. And the average person does that 8 times. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And there's this kind of sense out there that there aren't other alternatives. But it's my understanding there are, correct?
Well, yeah, and that's what's been happening in the last year or so, is I know the treasurer, Gina Raimondo, has been working with banks on this, and there's now alternatives like the Capital Good Fund that actually are making small loans available, also doing financial counseling with people, because 81% of these people say that most of them do not use this for an emergency. They use it for ordinary expenses. And 81% of the people, according to the Pew Institute, the charitable trust that did 2 surveys, said that most of these people said, you know what, they could have gotten the money somewhere else. They could have asked family, they could have asked a friend, they could have done it, another way that was legal and that other than being charged such high rates.
Right. And how will it improve our economy if we're able to kind of reform payday loans?
Well, first of all, most of the money, the biggest company in Rhode Island is Advanced America. They were a U.S. company, but now they've been bought out by a Mexican company.
That's right.
So first of all the profits are going out of the country, and they do most of the loans. So in that sense, and the fees that, there's a report that just came out today, and I can't quite quote it right now because it just came out today. It's by a group called Insight about actually the effect on Rhode Islanders with payday loans, and we're losing over millions of dollars just having the loans. Because of the financial burden that gets put on families.
Okay. Are we going to get this through this session?
I believe we're going to get reform this session.
Okay. It might be a compromise, though.
I hope it's the 36%. But I think we're going to get something done because we have to lower the rates.
Right. Thanks, Rep. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Frank. Margot Morisseau, you're with the Coalition for Payday Lending Reform. Tell us why it's so important that we reform payday loans in Rhode Island.
Payday loans are really taking advantage of our working class families who are really, just getting their feet underneath them and starting to advance and build their own assets. And getting caught in a payday loan is really a trap that really kicks their legs out from underneath them. And the predatory interest rate of 260% is just overwhelming for people to try and get out of debt at that rate.
And about how much in payday loans do we see in Rhode Island? The number is astronomical, isn't it?
It is, and it keeps increasing every year. I believe the latest figures that we have, $78 million was spent in Rhode Island on payday loans. So really, if you think about saving that money and investing that into our local economy and stores and grocery stores and other services, it would be a huge economic boost for our state.
I know we hear often that this is the only option for people to get a quick loan. That's not entirely true, is it, Margot?
No, it isn't true at all. And actually, they have done surveys. Pew had a great study out this summer where they said that they found out that 81% of people had another place to go to borrow the money. They could have asked friends or family. They could have gone to a pawn shop. They could have gotten money from their employer, asked for an advance on their paycheck. So really, for that last 19% that don't have another place to go, we have three great products now in Rhode Island that are payday loan alternatives. Capital Good Fund has an amazing product. They make up to $1,000 loans with no credit checks. Navigant Credit Union has something called the Smart Start, and West Elmwood Housing Development Corporation also has a loan alternative. So they're easy, they're accessible, they're here to cover that 19% that don't have any place else to go. So we're ready to move forward on this legislation.
How hard is it to get the bill through the State House when former Speaker Bill Murphy is lobbying for the other side?
It's very difficult. It's extremely difficult.
Yeah, and how do you see that play out? Do you, or do you just kind of sense his presence around the building?
Yes, I haven't had the chance to talk to him at all. I would be open to having a conversation with him, but we know that his influence here is quite astounding. And we have a coalition of over 80 members, over 40 organizations. Every year that this legislation doesn't get passed, people get very upset, and the coalition builds and builds and grows. I can't believe how large this coalition has become. And every year this coalition is dedicated to sticking together to make sure that we are going to get this passed. So we're not going away until this bill is passed.
Cool. Now you guys actually have a majority of members of the House signed on, correct?
Correct. We have 52 members of the House that are co-sponsors, and we have 29 members of the Senate. So we have the majority in both the House and the Senate. So the support is there, but now we need the support of leadership.
Yeah, and what's been your recent conversations with leadership, or where do you believe they are? I know that the Speaker of the House has been kind of on the fence and reticent to offer his support, but I haven't heard anything from the Senate President.
We haven't either. We would love the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with the Senate President and with Speaker Fox.
Okay, thanks, Margot.
Thank you.
At this time, it's also my pleasure to introduce Mayor Fontaine from Woonsocket.
Thank you so much, Senator and Representative Ferry, for your legislation, and I want to thank all of my fellow mayors and the coalition that has really brought this to the forefront. And I also, too, want to thank our treasurer for being here to show the support that this bill has. Mayor of one of the cities that has been hardest hit by this economy, both at the state and federal level, I see firsthand a lot of the people that are struggling and the ones that are being victimized by these predatory practices, by these organizations that are charging such exorbitant rates. And all of what was said is so true, and I think that it's about time that reform takes place. We look at so much of the work that has been done to try to help people, yet this practice sits out there as just one of the glaring examples of victimization of people that need the help the most. And so I'm proud to be here to help support the bill, and I see a lot of other people from Woonsocket here as well, so I want to thank you all for making the long trip up here. And but some of the statistics and some of the information that they've put out is very startling. When you think of 260% interest rates, it's almost unfathomable to consider. But when you think about it, in states that have enacted strong legal protections, the result is a large net decrease in payday loan usage. Borrowers are not driven to seek payday loans online or from other sources, and that's right out of the Pew Research Foundation. The only proven solution to the payday loan debt trap is a rate cap at or around 36%. States that attempted these reforms short of a rate cap, such as renewal bans, payment plans, and databases, have some of the worst debt trap statistics in the country. 17 states, plus the District of Columbia, plus Congress, or members of the military, cap the interest rates for payday loans at about 36%. Rhode Island is the only state in the Northeast allowing these loans to continue to collect triple-digit interest rates. And a study from North Carolina where payday lending was once legal found that 3/4 of low to middle-income families were unaffected by the ban on payday lending. And of the remaining quarter, 2 to 1 felt that payday lenders' departure from the state was a positive development in their life. So we can see from all of these statistics the effects that they have in real life, but I've seen it as people come across my desk and tell me that they can't afford to pay their water bills, they can't afford to pay their car taxes. And when you delve deeper into the problems with them, these are the people that are getting sucked into these debt traps with these agencies. So I think it's about time that we turn, and as much as we have a lot of work to do on so many other fronts, this should be an easy step to take for this General Assembly to enact these protections. So I stand with all of my mayors and the legislators here and thank all of you for your hard work. Thank you very much.
Tell us, Senator Pichardo, why is payday lending reform so important to Rhode Island?
Payday lending report is important to Rhode Islanders because 260% is wrong. The fact is that we need to ensure that consumers in Rhode Island and Rhode Islanders, families and individuals, deserve a rate that is not too onerous on them.
Yep. Now, there's this idea out there that there's no alternatives to payday loans, but that's not quite true, is it?
I would say that it's not quite true because over the years, more people have become educated, informed about it. There's some credit unions that are already developing and providing some of these loans and getting information out. To my knowledge, also Capital Good, which is a fund that is doing good in the community. And I think we need more of those stories in the community. Yeah. I think that, if some businesses, small businesses, offer these type of loans, small loans at 36%, I think that's a pretty good a loan for a business to earn. I think that is wrong at 260%. I think that is wrong at 200, 150. And so what we want to do is make sure that it's a reasonable rate for families and individuals to borrow some money.
Right, so it's not like if Advance America can't charge 260%, there's no option for people to get a quick loan, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's one of the companies, Advance America, there's Check and Go, and there might be, there's a couple of others here in Rhode Island. And I want to do say that they're not only as people would like to think about it, that it's in the minority community. The fact is, these payday loans apply to everyone.
There's one near me in North Kingstown.
Right, there's some in North Kingstown. In fact, I'm glad you mentioned North Kingstown because the reason why I also became so passionate about this is because I was serving in the military, and at that time, when we were stationed outside of in Florida and other states, we'll see these type of payday lending, and you would hear about the airmen being charged these erroneous, high interest rate. And so when I came back, I said, when you look at it, down the street where I would eat, there was a payday loan, and it was Advance America, I believe, on next to the Chinese restaurant. I forget the name of it. But I said, this is wrong. If it's good for the military, it should be good for Rhode Islanders. We must protect all consumers, and that should be our number one priority.
Right. Now, I know you guys have been debating this for 3 sessions now. What's been the holdup here at the State House? How come this isn't going through it? It seems to be common sense legislation, but something's holding it up.
Yeah. Well, it's been a little longer than that. I believe it's been the first time I introduced a bill was to eliminate the industry itself. I believe that we have over 60 organizations. That represents a lot of people. You saw the legislators that are supporting it. Yep. Some of my colleagues, in fact, 29 senators signed the legislation this year. So it's been building momentum. On the House, I believe we had close to 59, I believe. Yeah. And so I think that, over these past 3 years have really been incrementally informing people. Legislators are realizing that this is wrong. And I think that, and I hope, and I'm strongly advocating and I'm strongly put as a priority that this could be the year that we can move, as we say, the needle to ensure that not only is this a tool that our families can use as an economic driver and loans that are smaller. So that way Rhode Island can get some of those revenues for our resources, for government, municipal, and our social services programs to uplift families.
Right. Now, the payday loan industry, they have a powerful lobbyist in Bill Murphy. Is his kind of influence here at the State House, is that kind of one of the obstacles to getting this passed?
Well, what I say is that, You know, my colleague at that time, Speaker Murphy, and now Bill Murphy as the lobbyist, I think certainly we, as general, I think Rhode Island respects what he did and what he does. I think for us as legislators and proponents and leaders on this issue and on many issues, friendship doesn't have a wall. However, we can speak about the pros and cons, and I know where I stand. My colleagues know where I stand. When we are making decisions to know what is right for our community, we will make that decision. And at this time, for many of us, that does not weigh too much. Right now, what we know is that the numbers speak for themselves. Payday loans have been increasing, and there have been these payday loans have been in the backs of individuals and families in Rhode Island, and we have to do the right thing.
You think it'll pass this year, Senator?
I hope so. I'm working very hard on it. I mean, if we have to do a press conference every 2 weeks, that's what's going to take. But you know, the number one thing that's going to take is that as people are listening to this and hearing it, they got to pick up their phone and call their representative. If they're not on they need to hear that, hey, Representative Pachado, they don't need to call me because I'm there. Yeah. But those who are not signed up, they need to find out and say, we support this, you should support it too, and this is the reason, 3 reasons why. Because it's so important for the economic viability of our families and individuals to uplift themselves. Yeah.
We are here today to call attention to the need to increase the minimum wage, not only in Rhode Island, but also nationally. President Obama spoke about it in his speech, in the State of the Union message this year, and the simple message is this: no one working a 40-hour work week should be struggling to keep their heads just above the poverty level. As the richest, most powerful nation in the world, we can do better than that, and that is our cause, that is our goal. The minimum wage is obviously an important issue that affects far too many Rhode Islanders. Although the state of Rhode Island's minimum wage is $7.75 an hour, is higher than the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, it's not enough for too many families who are struggling to make ends meet. Now, in the last 2 decades, household income for the top 1% of wage earners grew by 58%. But over that same period, the other 99% saw an increase of only 5.8%. That's a tenfold difference that places the issue of income inequality in stark contrast. If the minimum wage of 1968 had kept pace with inflation, it would be worth approximately $10.50 an hour today. I believe that it's time, we all believe that it's time to acknowledge that the decline of the American middle class and the rise of income inequality are directly related in part to the loss of purchasing power from a largely stagnant federal minimum wage. So if there is one dream that unites us as Americans, one dream that can truly be called the American dream, it's that if we work hard, we can pass on to our children a better life and a better world than we ourselves enjoy.
Thank you, Jim, and it's a great honor to welcome you to the 1st Congressional District and to have my senior colleague here for this really important announcement. I want to thank everyone who is here and acknowledge some of the great folks behind me, Stan Israel and Patrick Quinn from SEIU, Jim Riley from Ufcw, Tom Savoy from the Carpenters, Brett LaPlante from the Plumbers, Joe Walsh from the Electrical Workers, and Scott Duhamel from the Painters representing the building trades, and others who have joined us today for this important event. I want to thank Kate for being here, and we're going to hear from her in a moment, and for the great work that you're doing at the Institute, and welcome Bernardo, and look forward to hearing your words. As you all know, our country was built based on a strong and thriving middle class, and that middle class was based on a simple idea that if you worked hard, played by the rules, you could afford to provide for your family, own a home, send your kids to college, and maybe even put a little away for retirement. Unfortunately, this has become harder and harder for so many Rhode Island families. The effects of the financial collapse on Wall Street and the lingering effects of the housing crisis are still being felt in cities and towns all across our state and all across this country. The gap between the wealthiest Americans and the most vulnerable has risen to its highest levels in decades, and the ability of families to move into the middle class is getting harder. According to Kids Count, 16.7% of Rhode Island children live in poverty. Thousands of Rhode Island families can't find work today. And our low federal minimum wage makes it difficult for many who do have work to provide for their families. And that's why I'm very proud to be here today with Congressman Landrigan, with Kate Brewster, with all the individuals behind me, really to announce our co-sponsorship of the Fair Minimum Wage Act, a common sense proposal that would raise the federal minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $10.10 an hour over the next 3 years. For the last 4 years, the federal minimum wage has failed to keep up with the cost of living and left working families dependent on government aid to make ends meet. A full-time worker earning the minimum wage makes $14,500 a year, leaving families below the poverty level. No one who works full-time should have to raise their family in poverty. Enacting the Fair Minimum Wage Act would increase pay for as many as 30 million Americans and offer tipped workers their first pay hike since 1991 and would directly benefit 72,000 Rhode Island workers. In addition, at a time when the real value of the minimum wage is at historic lows, this measure would increase consumer spending, helping to strengthen our national and state economy. A Fiscal Policy Institute study found that states with higher minimum wages have, quote, consistently better economic indicators than others. And an analysis of recent studies indicate that raising the minimum wage would not negatively impact job growth. As a new member of the House Democratic Whip Task Force on Poverty and Opportunity, I know that this Fair Minimum Wage Act is one step in the right direction, but there's still much more work to do. It's very important that we build a 21st century economy that works for all Americans, all Rhode Islanders, not just those at the top. And I look forward to working with my senior colleague, Congressman Landrigan, and all of you as we work to ensure that we raise the federal minimum wage to help working Rhode Island families.
So Scott, tell us how an increase in the minimum wage would reverberate through the economy. How would it help people who are making more than minimum wage?
Well, I could say what I see every day from my members and the other members of the building trades is when they work and when they get paid, and especially if they get increased pays, they spend more. It's just it's a natural inclination for all workers. If you make more money, you spend more money. Maybe to benefit yourself, maybe to get better housing, maybe to have a steak and a beer when before you were having hot dogs and beans. But it's absolutely true. Those who earn more spend more, and that goes directly to our economy in Rhode Island. I've never seen it change. I don't think there's any statistics that could disprove that.
Yep. Our 2012 Rhode Island Standard of Need that looks at what it costs to live and raise a family in the Ocean State finds that a minimum wage worker today at $7.75 an hour falls short of meeting their basic needs by $474 a month. So it's quite significant. The wage that a person would need to earn to keep up with the cost of housing, food, healthcare, some of the very basic expenses that we all have is between $11 and $12 an hour. So certainly a minimum wage of $10.10 per hour gets us much, much closer to a person being able to afford to live here in the Ocean State, which is an expensive place to live.
Yeah, tell me about that. Why is raising the minimum wage kind of uniquely important to us here in Rhode Island?
Well, certainly the Northeast is an expensive place to live and raise a family, and I think that we all agree that the minimum wage is clearly the floor, that where the wages we want to have are higher. And generally when we see an increase in the minimum wage, we see wages of lower wage workers maybe are earning a little bit more than the minimum wage go up. And so again, it will benefit all of us. When people are able to spend more in our economy, it can help grow jobs, and it certainly behooves us all to have people in our community who are able to keep their heads above water.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen 3 times each week: Tuesdays at 7 p.m., Thursdays at 8 p.m., and Saturdays at 5 p.m.